1916 rolled around, there was deadlock. The British came up with the idea of a metal fortress to go across no man's land and destroy barbed wire and enemies along the way. It was the first anti-tank rifle made by the Mauser company, and it was basically a giant Tghwer rifle on steroids. Breech loading, one shot of course. It was about 5'5" and weighed in just about 35 pounds with a bipod, depending on which bipod you had. For sure you needed a bipod, for sure. But if you had you don't need a bipod if you're in a trench, but more than likely you'll be a marksman behind your trenches using this rifle. So it's pretty much as tall and half the weight of an average man in the 1900s. So you're basically carrying around a man or a woman at this point, like a human. You're basically carrying around a human at this point. The blowback and the recoil could dislodge your shoulder. It was that powerful enough. It was powerful enough to dislodge your shoulder. If you weren't careful, it was a hefty, very hefty 13 by 2mm 2F Tghwer cartridge, which was a round, or a marksman. CN Arsenal did point this out. It was also a magazine-fed variant, of course. The magazine-fed was very limited. I mean, this anti-tank rifle was around for 6-7 months of the war, basically the end of the war. So there weren't a lot made, but there were enough to not really stem the tide, but there were enough to get around, in a sense. People owned them. Is actually not like a prototype weapon that Battlefield 1 does, but it was an actual weapon. Like I said, it was made from 1918 until basically November, and most of the time Germans only had required two men to operate it, compared to the Entente tank numbers. The Entente had thousands of tanks versus the Germans 20, so this is why the tank Tghwer was made in the first place, to stem the tide. Because if you can't beat them, try and knock out as many tanks as you can, I guess. So that's why Germany really needed this anti-tank rifle, because they didn't have enough tanks, and very precious supplies like artillery and grenades had to be focused on the tanks. So to have this tank rifle was kind of to stem the balance, if you could say. Before the tank Tghwer, there was of course grenades. Gebelt anti-tank grenade, which is a bundle of 6 or 9 grenades if you're lucky, and artillery, FK 196 cannons, which was kind of artillery, short range artillery. And there was basically, they tried machine guns, anything to try and stop the tanks from down, or immobilize the tanks from getting near the trench. They also build tank ditches, as you may imagine, and widen the trench so that if the tank was close enough and actually was going to go over to the second trench, because remember the trench lines are 1, 2, 3 reservists, artillery, and beyond that is command post. So the tanks will have to get at least 3 or more trenches to even actually make a massive break. So that would at least try and slow down and stem the tide before the T-Gewehr. Also, the Germans had the SKM round, which was bigger than a Parabellum round, but at the same time it was smaller than a 13 by 2mm tooth Tghwer round. It was about half the size of the tooth, and it was used primarily on iron bunkers and of course pillboxes. CN Arsenal also pointed out that it could penetrate a tank, but by the time it got near the tank, the flight time and the kinetic power would slow down, and by the time it even reached the tank and even pierced the tank, it couldn't really kill a person. It could wound the person, but the kinetic energy and the flight time would severely weaken the round, if that makes sense. Now, this is the meat of the gun. It could really go through Renault tanks, Mark 1 to 5 tanks, Little Willy tanks, Shimon tanks, chassis tanks. They were very, very early tanks from the French. I think they're chassis. And Shimon and the Little Willy in general are actually very easy targets. You could pierce them with even the SKM round that I was talking about just now, which was used for iron pillboxes and iron defenses, like sniper nests, like the sheet of metal with the hole in it. That actual steel was about 12 millimeters of steel, hardened steel. It could definitely bash through a 12 millimeter steel, slanted steel plate to about 15 to 60 millimeters. The question was, was it going to get through? What did happen was, on out of the range, which is Forgotten's weapons kind of firing channel, it did get through the 14 by 16 millimeter steel, which was hardened, so it was basically a Mark 1 tank, and it did pierce through. Some did deflect, but it was at an angle of 45 degrees. So to put that in essence, it was basically trying to hit the corner of the steel, which was going to be the hardest part of the steel. So it deflected and made a dent. So in essence, you have to be spot on with this Tghwer rifle, or else it will dent, or even ricochet. Sometimes it would even ricochet. What would happen when it pierced? Because we're talking about piercing and getting through the tank, but what is the actual effectiveness when it got through the tank? So my conclusion is that they would try and hit the cupola of the driver that was driving. The Mark 5 tank, the British tank, was the cupola was in the front between the two. The cupola was between the front. The cupola was in between the two metal tracks, so that was the easiest one. Figuring out which one was the driver wasn't a problem, because they would have about 20 rounds to fire. So if it's not the left, it has to be the right. So they would try and take out the driver more than actually damaging the tank, because later in the war the Germans would use these tanks against the British and the French, because most of their tanks was AV7s, only 20 of them were made, so it made more sense to steal tanks than to actually destroy them. But if they were a real threat, they could destroy them if they wanted to, by flanking the tank and going around the engine compartment, which is in the back. If you could destroy the rotating turret, you could also take out the driver with a Renault tank. And for the Shimon and Willy tank, you just blast through it and it will destroy, because if you go through the Willy, it would automatically destroy the engine. It would blow up the engine. Saint-Chamond is the same thing, because all their engines were at the back. So you can just pierce through a Saint-Chamond, boom, it will destroy. You could pierce through a Little Willy, boom, destroyed. The Mark 5 was kind of different, because the Mark 5 engine was slightly at the back, but also on the side. The same thing for the Renault, it's very hard to actually hit. So yeah, that is basically what you would do when the Tghwer bullet actually goes through the steel, because we're talking about going through the steel, piercing the steel. Why was it news? So that's basically my own conclusions. Either kill the driver and take the tank for yourself, or destroy the tank, which it was obviously made for. In the end, with America joining the war, the tank would just ultimately decimate them, especially in the 100 Days Offensive and Cambrai. So there was too many massive tank formations and tactics and reloading, and if a tank saw you while reloading a T-Gewehr, or even just saw you in general, you'll be basically blown to bits at that point. So in practice and in theory, it did a good job. A less common magazine-fed one could have stemmed the tide, but at the end of the day, the Americans were here, and the war was basically over. Now, I could say that the legacy of the Tghwer, it did kind of serve in the Weimar Republic, the 1990 Weimar Republic uprising, and until 1933 they stand on the shelf till they got the Panzer ZZ-B1, and at the beginning of World War II the Soviets actually used the modified T-Gewehr, which would be later called the PTRD-41. So in essence, it served for 1 year. It got put in the armory for 20 years, and it did its job well and became a modified Soviet weapon in 1941. And that's basically the T-Gewehr. The videos I watched were from CN Arsenal and On the Range. Also, Forgotten Weapons did do a piece on it, and did do one which was the in-range one, yes, the Mark 1, the Mark 5 steel hardened, which was the one that I was talking about earlier with the 45-degree angle, and the 45 degrees and straight dead on impact in the middle. So of course I'm gonna link them in the description. So that's basically the Tghwer, and that's basically it. So yeah, gonna be meta here. Assault Battlefield 1 is gonna come out in September, so hopefully Tannenberg will come out before that. I don't think we can do it. What's another faction? The French, the British. We could do the British if they're both gonna drop like in the very late of the year, so that's not bad. We could do the British, so I guess the British is next if the Russians don't want to come out, so British it is. Alright, I'm gonna see you in the next one. Gotta do 2 more, and this one should go last, so I should put, I'm gonna do Verdun now and then Falkenheim, and then that's pretty much it. So see you in a bit. Oh, also I hope you learned something, just gonna put that in the end, why not.